An elderly father suffered daily food deprivation imposed by his ambitious daughter-in-law, until the family parrot witnessed everything and, with its disturbing repetitions, revealed the cruel truth to the millionaire son. Arthur, the millionaire, was accustomed to the clamor of Luro, the parrot that had been part of the family for years. The bird, with its vibrant feathers and ability to imitate voices, was a special attraction in the mansion. However, in recent weeks, something in Luro's repertoire had changed. His usual imitations of doorbells, laughter, and catchphrases were replaced by a persistent and disturbing repetition. "I'm hungry, I'm hungry." At first, Arthur didn't pay much attention. Perhaps Laura was just picking up a phrase from a television show or one of the servants, but the frequency and intensity of the phrase began to trouble him. It wasn't just the repetition, it was the way Laura said it. The voice was weak, almost a lament, and carried a tone that Arthur, in moments of distraction, swore was his father Elias's voice. "Laura, what is that, my friend?" Arthur asked one morning as he drank his coffee in the spacious living room. The parrot, perched on its golden stand, turned its head, its black eyes fixed on Arthur. "I'm hungry, I'm hungry," it repeated, and to Arthur's astonishment, a muffled metallic sound followed, like a plate being quickly emptied. Clink, splash, clink. Arthur frowned. "What's that noise, Laura? Are you imitating the kitchen dishes?" Sophia, his wife, appeared in the room, radiant as ever, a perfect smile on her lips. "Good morning, my love. What's Laura up to today?" She approached, kissing Arthur on the forehead. "That bird is quite a character. He must have heard Maria washing the dishes." Arthur tried to smile, but the image of his father, Elias, came to his mind. Elias, who spent most of his time in his room, seemed more fragile each day. Sophia always assured him that his father was receiving the best care and eating well. "He's just a little depressed, Arthur. It's his age. But I assure you, he eats everything we prepare with such care." That afternoon, Arthur decided to visit his father. He found Elias sitting in his favorite armchair, looking at the garden with a distant gaze. Sophia was by his side, holding a small bowl of soup. "Look who came to see you, my love. Your dear son." She smiled at Arthur, then at Elias, with an almost exaggerated sweetness. "Your father is a bit lacking in appetite today, Arthur, but I'm here, making sure he eats at least a little bit." The bowl of soup looked watery, almost transparent, and the portion was minuscule. Elias, with trembling hands, tried to bring the spoon to his mouth, but most of the liquid spilled. Sophia, with a patient sigh, took the spoon and began to feed him, wiping the corners of her father-in-law's mouth with a napkin. "There, my angel, just a little more." Arthur watched the scene, a pang of discomfort in his chest. His father seemed so small, so vulnerable. As Sophia fed him, Luro, who had been brought into the room to keep the elderly man company, let out a sudden cry. "I'm hungry! I'm hungry!" The weak and mournful voice, followed by the unmistakable clink, splash of plates being emptied. Sophia flinched, a flicker of irritation crossing her eyes for an instant, before being quickly replaced by her mask of affection. "Luro, stop that! You'll scare Grandpa." Elias, however, didn't seem scared. His eyes, previously distant, fixed on the parrot with a strange intensity, almost of recognition. Arthur noticed this. That look, the parrot's voice, the sound of the dishes. It was all so vivid. That night, lying beside Sophia, who was already fast asleep, Arthur couldn't close his eyes. Luro's words echoed in his mind, repeatedly. "I'm hungry, I'm hungry." His father's voice, the sound of the dishes. A chilling suspicion began to form in his heart. Sophia was so attentive, so dedicated. But what if? What if there was something more behind that facade of perfection? The idea was absurd, cruel, but the parrot didn't lie. It merely repeated what it heard. And what it was repeating was a cry for help. Arthur knew he needed to uncover the truth, and to do that, he would have to look beyond appearances. The dawn dragged heavily upon Arthur. Sleep, a luxury he rarely denied himself, seemed to have fled, replaced by an agonizing vigil. Beside him, Sophia slept serenely, oblivious to the storm brewing in her husband's mind. Luro's words, "I'm hungry, I'm hungry," and the sound of plates being emptied, clink, splash, repeated like a macabre mantra. His father Elias's weak voice seemed to merge with the parrot's, creating a disturbing dissonance that Arthur couldn't ignore. He got out of bed, walking barefoot to the window, watching the sunrise paint the sky in pale hues. The mansion, usually a refuge of peace and opulence, now seemed like a stage for a silent drama. How could he have been so blind, so absorbed in his business and the perfect image of his life that he hadn't noticed his own father's suffering? Guilt gnawed at him. Sophia, his wife, the woman he loved and trusted, capable of such cruelty. The idea was monstrous, a blow to everything he believed in. But the parrot. Luro had no reason to lie. He was a mirror, repeating the reality he witnessed. That morning, Arthur went down for coffee with a new perspective. His eyes, previously distracted, now observed Sophia's every move. She was impeccable as always, preparing his tea with the same grace. "Good morning, my love. Did you sleep well?" she asked, with a smile that once melted him, but now seemed rehearsed. "Not really," Arthur replied, trying to keep his voice casual. "I had a restless night thinking about work." He watched her as she instructed Maria, the cook, about Elias's lunch. "Remember, Maria, Grandpa needs something light and nutritious. A well-blended vegetable soup, no chunks, and fresh orange juice. And please make sure he eats everything." Sophia's voice was sweet, but Arthur noticed a slight tone of command, almost a veiled threat, in the last sentence. Maria nodded, looking a bit tense. Later, while Arthur was in his office pretending to work, the idea of installing cameras began to crystallize in his mind. It was the only way to obtain irrefutable proof, to see with his own eyes what Laura was trying to tell him. The mere suspicion was already unbearable. He needed the truth, whatever the cost. He thought about how he would do it. A business trip. Yes, that would give him the perfect time and excuse to act without raising suspicions. He picked up the phone and dialed the number of an old contact, a security expert who had done discreet jobs for him in the past. "I need a favor, Carlos. Something very delicate that requires the utmost discretion." In the following days, Arthur began to plant the seed of his trip. "Sophia, I received an important call. It seems I'll have to go to São Paulo next week to close a crucial deal. It will be quick, maybe 3 or 4 days." Sophia reacted with the expected concern. "Oh, my love, already. But you just got back from a trip. And who will take care of your father while you're away? You know how needy he gets." Arthur forced a smile. "I know, my angel. But you'll be here, won't you? You always take such good care of him. And Maria and the other servants, too. Don't worry, it will be quick." As they talked, Luro, who was in the living room, let out one of his cries. "I'm hungry. I'm hungry." The weak and mournful voice, followed by the unmistakable clink, splash. Sophia shot an irritated glance at the bird, but quickly disguised it with a sigh of exasperation. "This parrot is unbearable today." Arthur felt a chill. That sound, that voice. There were no more doubts. He had to act. The image of his father, fragile and defenseless, mixed with Luro's pleading voice, solidified his determination. He would uncover the truth, and if Sophia was guilty, he would make her pay. The pain of betrayal was already beginning to gnaw at his soul, but the need to protect his father was stronger. The trap was being set. The days that followed were a silent torment for Arthur. He moved through the mansion like a ghost, every smile from Sophia, every gesture of affection towards Elias, a stab in his already wounded soul. The charade was unbearable, but necessary. He needed irrefutable proof, not just for himself, but for the world, to unmask the woman he had sworn to love. The call with Carlos, the security expert, was quick and to the point. "I need a discreet system, Carlos. Tiny, almost invisible cameras, installed in my father's rooms, the kitchen and the dining room, and I need remote access in real time." Carlos, accustomed to the eccentricities and discretion requirements of his wealthy clients, simply nodded. "No problem, Mr. Arthur. When can I come?" Arthur planned the installation for an afternoon when Sophia would be out at one of her weekly social engagements. He invented a last-minute meeting for himself, ensuring he would be home to supervise. Carlos arrived in an unmarked car, wearing the uniform of an air conditioning maintenance company, a perfect cover to avoid raising suspicions among the staff. As Carlos worked with the precision of a surgeon, Arthur guided him, his heart beating wildly. In Elias's room, the cameras were strategically positioned to capture the bed area and the bedside table where meals were served. In the kitchen, a tiny lens was embedded near the trash can, and another, discreetly, above the main counter. In the dining room, where Elias occasionally came down for a family meal, another camera was installed in the chandelier. Every click, every adjustment by Carlos, was an echo of the betrayal Arthur feared to confirm. He felt like a spy in his own home, a detective investigating his own life. Guilt gnawed at him, but the image of his father, fragile and dependent, superseded any hesitation. He needed to protect Elias, whatever the cost. When Carlos finished, the cameras were practically invisible. "Everything's set up, Mr. Arthur. The remote access is on your tablet. Just open the app and you'll have real-time images. And don't worry, the system is encrypted and undetectable." Arthur thanked him, feeling a lump in his throat. The trap was complete. In the following days, Arthur intensified the narrative of his business trip. He made important calls loudly, simulated virtual meetings, and even asked Sophia to prepare a small carry-on bag for him, as if it were a quick and unexpected trip. "My love, the meeting in São Paulo has been brought forward. I leave tomorrow morning early," he announced one evening during dinner. Sophia, who was impeccable in a silk dress, stopped cutting her meat. "Tomorrow? So suddenly? But what about your father? He'll miss you so much." Her voice was sweet, but Arthur noticed an almost imperceptible gleam in her eyes, a spark of something he couldn't decipher, but which deeply bothered him. "I know, my angel, but it's unavoidable. You'll take care of him, won't you? And Maria will be here to help." He forced a smile, trying to seem convincing. "Of course, my love. I always do. Don't worry about anything here. Just close that deal and come home soon." She stood up and kissed his forehead, a gesture that once comforted him, but now seemed cold and calculating. The next morning, Arthur said goodbye to Elias in his father's room. The old man was sitting in the armchair, looking more fragile than ever. "I'll be back soon, Father. Take care." Elias merely nodded, a distant look in his eyes. Arthur felt a tightness in his chest. He needed to act fast. In the entrance hall, Sophia awaited him with a radiant smile. "Have a good trip, my love. I'll be waiting for you." She hugged him, a hug that Arthur felt was more of relief than affection. As he got into the car, Luro from the living room let out his loudest and most desperate cry. "I'm hungry! I'm hungry!" The sound of the plates, clink, splash, seemed more vivid than ever. Arthur felt a chill down his spine. It was a warning, a promise. He instructed the driver to take him to the airport, but halfway there, he asked to be dropped off at a discreet hotel he had booked. There was no flight to São Paulo. There was only the truth he was about to uncover. In the hotel room, Arthur turned on the tablet. His hands trembled as he opened the security application. Live images of the mansion appeared on the screen. His father's room, the kitchen, the dining room, everything in real time. He took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. The game had begun. He was ready to see, ready for the truth, however painful it might be. In the hotel room, the silence was almost palpable, broken only by the soft hum of the air conditioning and Arthur's accelerated heartbeat. The tablet in his hands seemed to weigh a ton, the screen glowing with live images of the mansion. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm in his chest, and tapped the app icon. The images appeared. First, the kitchen. Maria, the cook, was preparing something, oblivious to the invisible surveillance. Arthur switched to his father's room. Elias was in bed, looking even more fragile under the pale morning light, his eyes fixed on some distant point. The dining room was empty. Time dragged on. Arthur felt every second like an eternity, his anxiety growing with the wait. He watched Sophia come down for breakfast, impeccable as always, chatting with Maria about the day's menu. Her voice was calm, her gestures elegant, no hint of malice. Arthur felt a brief flicker of doubt. Could he be mistaken? Was guilt blinding him? But then Luro's voice echoed in the living room, captured by the camera's microphone. "I'm hungry! I'm hungry!" The sound was weak, almost a lament. Sophia, who was picking up a fruit, paused for an instant, a muscle in her jaw contracting imperceptibly before she regained her composure. "This Parrot is unbearable today," she murmured. But Arthur noticed the poorly disguised tone of irritation. Lunch was approaching. Arthur focused the camera on Elias's room. He saw Maria enter with a tray, carefully placing it on the bedside table. "Your lunch, Mr. Elias. Vegetable soup and orange juice, as Mrs. Sophia requested." Elias tried to pick up the spoon, but his hands trembled. Maria patiently helped him, feeding him a few spoonfuls. After a few minutes, Sophia entered the room. "Maria, you can go. I'll take care of my father-in-law now," Sophia said, with a sweet smile. Maria nodded and left, leaving them alone. Arthur held his breath. Sophia sat on the edge of the bed, took the spoon, and brought it to Elias's mouth. "Come on, Grandpa, just a little more. You need to be strong." Her voice was mellifluous, full of an affection that Arthur now saw as a grotesque mask. Elias ate a few more spoonfuls, but seemed tired, turning his face away. "I don't want any more, Sophia," he murmured, his voice almost inaudible. "Oh, but you must, Grandpa. It's for your own good," she insisted. But Arthur noticed the lack of conviction in her eyes. She waited a few seconds, looked at the door, making sure Maria wasn't nearby. Then, with shocking speed, the mask fell. The smile vanished from her face, replaced by an expression of impatience and contempt. She stood up, picked up the tray, and, without even looking at Elias, walked to the trash can hidden behind a small dresser in the corner of the room. Arthur watched, his blood freezing in his veins. With an abrupt and cruel movement, Sophia tilted the bowl of soup and the glass of juice. The sound was unmistakable. Clink! The metal of the bowl hitting the rim of the trash can, followed by a muffled splash as the liquid contents were poured out. The spoon was tossed in too, making another clink. Elias, from the bed, let out a weak moan, a sound of helplessness that tore at Arthur's heart. Sophia threw the tray back onto the bedside table, the bowl and glass empty, and smoothed her dress. She looked at Elias, who was now closing his eyes, exhausted. "There, Grandpa, you ate everything. Now rest." Her voice was cold, devoid of any emotion. She left the room, closing the door softly behind her, the false smile reappearing the moment she stepped into the hallway. Arthur felt the world spin. The air seemed to have been sucked from his lungs. He saw it. He saw it with his own eyes. The cold, calculating cruelty, the betrayal, the image of Sophia so sweet and affectionate in front of him. Transforming into a monstrous figure in his absence, Luro's clink, splash, his father's weak voice, everything fit into a macabre puzzle. An icy fury began to spread through his body, replacing the initial pain. It wasn't just anger, it was a deep indignation, a sense of violation of everything he believed in. His wife, the woman he loved, was depriving his father of food, letting him slowly waste away. He gripped the tablet so tightly that his knuckles turned white. The game hadn't just begun. He had been overcome by a brutal truth. The trap was complete, and the hunt had been successful. Now it was Arthur's turn to act, and he would make Sophia pay for every drop of suffering she had inflicted on his father. Elias's dignity would be restored, and Sophia's destroyed. He turned off the tablet, the dark screen reflecting the image of a transformed man, ready for war. In the hotel room, Arthur remained motionless for long minutes, the tablet turned off in his hands. The image of Sophia, with her false smile, and the cruel gesture of pouring out the food, was burned into his mind. The icy fury that had invaded him began to solidify into a relentless determination. He could no longer doubt. The truth was grotesque, but undeniable. He turned on the tablet again, not to watch, but to review. He rewound the recording, watching the scene repeatedly, as if he needed to hammer every detail into his soul. The clink of the bowl in the trash can, the muffled splash of the soup, his father's weak moan. Each repetition was a stab, but also a reinforcement of his conviction. He needed more. He needed a pattern, irrefutable proof that left no room for defense. The following days were a silent torture. Arthur didn't leave the hotel room, living in a state of constant vigil, his eyes fixed on the tablet screen. He observed the mansion, his own home, like a stranger. The next morning, the scene repeated. Maria brought breakfast to Elias. Sophia entered, dismissed the cook with her usual sweetness, and as soon as Maria left, the mask fell. Arthur saw the same look of impatience, the same quick and dissimulated movement. The porridge and tea, almost untouched, were poured into the room's trash can. The clink, splash echoed through Arthur's headphones. And almost instantly, Luro let out a shrill, "I'm hungry, I'm hungry." From the living room, his voice sharper and more desperate than ever. Arthur felt a shiver. The parrot was the voice of truth, the only witness he had ignored for so long. In the afternoon, lunch. This time Elias seemed even weaker. He could barely hold the spoon. Sophia, with a forced smile, helped him with a few spoonfuls before Elias turned his face away, exhausted. "I don't want any more, Sophia," he whispered, his voice a mere thread. "But you must, Grandpa," she replied, her voice mellifluous, but her eyes devoid of affection. Arthur saw the hesitation, the glance at the door, the certainty that she was alone. And then, the cruel ritual. The tray in the trash can. The clink, splash. Luro, like a macabre clock, cried out again, and Arthur felt a lump in his throat. His father was wasting away before his eyes, and he, the son, was watching helplessly, miles away. With each meal, the same charade. Sophia entered Elias's room, feigned affection, waited for Maria to leave, and then, with terrifying coldness, discarded the food. Elias, increasingly fragile, could barely protest. His pleas were mere moans, ignored by his ambitious daughter-in-law. Arthur watched his father grow thinner, his eyes lose their sparkle, his skin become paler. Elias's pain was palpable through the screen, and Arthur's helplessness gnawed at him. He accumulated hours of footage. Each video was irrefutable proof of Sophia's cruelty. He had the times, the gestures, the expressions. He had the sound of the plates being emptied, his father's lament, and Luro's insistent echo. The parrot, once an irritation, was now an ally, an innocent voice crying out for justice. On the night of the third day of his trip, Arthur turned off the tablet. His eyes were red with fatigue, but his mind was clear as crystal. The initial pain had transformed into a cold and calculating rage. There was no more room for doubt, for forgiveness. Sophia had revealed herself a monster, and he would not allow her to continue torturing his father. He stood up, walked to the window, and looked at the illuminated city. The mansion, with its opulence and dark secrets, seemed distant. But he knew the distance was only physical. He was ready to return, ready to unmask Sophia, to tear off her mask of sweetness and expose the cruelty behind it. He would do it not only for his father, but for every stolen meal, for every ignored lament, for every "I'm hungry" cry Luro had let out. The hunt was over. The trap was full. Now it was time for justice. Arthur picked up the phone. "Driver, prepare the car. I'm going home, and I want you to take me straight to the mansion. No stops." His voice was firm, without hesitation. The war was about to begin. The driver, a discreet man loyal to the family for decades, nodded without asking questions, but the tension in Arthur's voice did not go unnoticed. The car glided through the night, cutting through the illuminated streets of São Paulo. Arthur was in the back seat, the tablet still in his hands, though turned off. The dark screen was now a mirror of his own soul, somber and resolute. Every kilometer traveled was a step towards the inevitable reckoning. He mentally reviewed the scenes, the dialogues he would have. There would be no hysterical screams, not from him. His revenge would be cold, calculated, devastating. He wanted Sophia to feel every drop of humiliation his father had felt, every pang of hunger, every moment of despair. The image of Elias, wasting away in bed, was a fuel burning in his veins. The mansion appeared on the horizon, imposing and silent under the moonlight. The lights on in some windows seemed to mock the darkness nestled in its rooms. The car stopped smoothly in front of the main entrance. Arthur got out, feeling the cold night air on his face, but the temperature of his rage was incandescent. The door was opened by one of the security guards, who seemed surprised by his early return. "Good evening, Mr. Arthur. We weren't expecting you so soon." "Good evening, Marcos. Is Sophia home? And my father?" Arthur asked, his voice controlled, but with an intensity that made the guard step back. "Yes, sir. Mrs. Sophia is in the living room. Mr. Elias has already retired to his room, as usual." Arthur walked directly to the living room. The door was ajar. Inside, Sophia was sitting in one of the velvet armchairs, absorbed in her cell phone, with a slight smile on her lips. The scene was one of disturbing normality, a stark contrast to the cruelty she concealed. He cleared his throat. Sophia looked up, her smile dissolving into an expression of surprise, quickly replaced by a mask of forced joy. "Arthur, my love, what a surprise. I thought you wouldn't be back until tomorrow. Has something happened?" She stood up, coming towards him, arms open for a hug. Arthur stopped her with a gesture. His eyes were icy. "A lot has happened, Sophia. More than you can imagine. I need you to call Maria and the other staff who are on duty, and ask Maria to bring my father here, please." Arthur's voice was so cold that Sophia felt a chill. Her mask of joy faltered. "But Arthur, what is this? My father is already asleep, and the staff, for what?" "Do as I say, Sophia." "Now," he replied, his voice leaving no room for discussion. Sophia, sensing Arthur's unusual seriousness and coldness, hesitated for a moment, but the authority in his tone made her back down. She picked up the internal phone, her fingers trembling slightly. "Maria, please come to the living room and ask the other staff who are awake to come too. And please, help Mr. Elias come here." While Sophia made the calls, Arthur walked to Luro's cage. The parrot was perched, watching him with its head tilted. "You were right, Luro," Arthur whispered. a lump in his throat. You were right all along. Within minutes, Maria, with a pale and worried face, entered the room, followed by two more night staff. Behind her, with slow and dragging steps, came Elias, leaning on his cane and Maria's arm, his fragile body looking even smaller and more stooped. His eyes, once full of life, were now wells of tiredness and confusion. He looked at Arthur, then at Sophia, not understanding what was happening. The living room, usually a refuge of luxury and tranquility, was now charged with a palpable tension. Sophia stood, arms crossed, trying to maintain her composure, but her eyes betrayed a growing nervousness. Arthur waited for everyone to be present, his eyes scanning each face, finally settling on Sophia. "Good evening, everyone," Arthur began, his voice echoing in the silence. "I've called you here because there's something very serious that needs to be revealed. Something that happened under this roof, and that can no longer remain a secret." He took the tablet from the briefcase he carried. The dark screen seemed to suck all the light from the room. Sophia took a step back, a chilling premonition tightening her chest. Luro, in his cage, let out a low chirp, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. "I faked a trip," Arthur continued, his voice low, but sharp as a blade. "But in reality, I was watching everything that happened in this house." He turned on the tablet. The screen's light illuminated his face, revealing the depth of his pain and anger. Sophia stared at him, her eyes wide, panic beginning to set in. "And what I saw, Sophia," Arthur said, raising the tablet so everyone could see the screen, "was the truth about you." He tapped the screen, and the recording began to play. The image of Sophia, with her false smile, entering Elias's room, dismissing Maria, and then the cruel gesture. The bowl of food being poured into the trash can, the clink of the metal, the muffled splash of the soup. And, almost immediately, Elias's weak voice, I'm hungry. The room plunged into a shocked silence. Maria brought her hands to her mouth, her eyes teary. Elias looked at the screen, then at Sophia, an expression of horror and disbelief on his aged face. Sophia paled, her face contorting in a mixture of fury and despair. "No, it's not what it looks like," she stammered, her voice failing, but Arthur didn't hear her. He was already rewinding the video, ready to show more, ready to unmask her completely. The war had begun, and Sophia was about to lose everything. Arthur ignored Sophia's desperate plea. His eyes, previously red with fatigue, now shone with an icy determination. He tapped the screen again, and another video began. It was the next morning's meal. Sophia, with the same expression of false concern, helping Elias to eat, only to then, with a furtive glance at the door, pour the contents of the bowl into the trash can. The clink splash echoed through the room, amplified by the tablet. And, like a macabre chorus, Luro, in his cage, let out a shrill, I'm hungry. Imitating Elias's weak voice, Maria let out a small, muffled cry, covering her mouth with her hands. Tears streamed down her face. Elias, who had previously seemed confused, now had wide eyes, fixed on the screen, then on Sophia. A deep pain and indescribable horror began to etch themselves onto his aged features. He gripped his cane tightly, his body trembling slightly. Sophia, seeing the scene repeat, tried a new tactic. "Arthur, please, this is a misunderstanding. I was just discarding the food he didn't want, so it wouldn't spoil. My father is stubborn, you know." Her voice was hysterical, but Arthur didn't yield. "Stubborn?" Arthur repeated, his voice dangerously low. "Or too weak to fight against your cruelty, Sophia? Too weak to ask for help while you let him waste away?" He scrolled the screen, showing more and more videos. Lunch, dinner, breakfast. The same cruel routine, the same indifference in her eyes, the same clink splash, and Luro's same lament. "I'm hungry! I'm hungry!" the parrot repeated, almost as if narrating the scene live. Each video was a stab in Elias's heart. He saw himself growing thinner, his eyes losing their sparkle, his voice becoming a whisper. The truth hit him heavy and painful. The hunger he felt, the weakness that consumed him, was not the work of chance or old age. It was the work of Sophia, the woman he had welcomed as a daughter. His eyes filled with tears, not of anger, but of a deep sadness and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. Sophia, previously pale, was now flushed, sweat dripping down her forehead. Her haughty posture had crumbled. She tried to argue, but the words tangled in her throat. I swear I didn't. Arthur, please, you can't believe this. It's a setup, a fabrication." Arthur paused the video, the image frozen on Sophia, falsely smiling at the camera. He raised the tablet, pointing to the screen. "A setup? A fabrication, Sophia? Do you really think I'm that naive? I saw it with my own eyes, Sophia. Hours and hours of footage. I heard my father's laments. I heard Luro, whom you so ignored, crying out for him. He was the only witness I had, and I was too blind to listen." He lowered the tablet, his eyes fixed on hers. "You didn't just deprive my father of food, Sophia. You humiliated him, tortured him, let him waste away before my eyes, all while pretending to be the perfect daughter-in-law. You took advantage of his vulnerability, his age, his kindness. The other staff, until then silent and shocked, now looked at Sophia with a mixture of revulsion and pity. Her mask of sweetness had fallen, revealing the cruelty hidden behind it. "You lost, Sophia," Arthur declared, his voice cold and sharp. "You lost everything. This mansion, the surname, the fortune, everything you coveted and tried to steal so vilely. You are no longer welcome here, not in this house. Not in my life, not in my father's life." Sophia staggered, as if she'd been punched. Her eyes, previously full of panic, were now empty, fixed on Arthur, then on Elias, who looked at her with a pain that was almost a silent judgment. The public humiliation was overwhelming. She had been unmasked, exposed in her cruelty before everyone. "Maria," Arthur called, his voice softening a little as he addressed the employee. "Please help my father sit down, and then call the security guards. Sophia will not spend another night under this roof." Maria nodded, tears still streaming, and gently led Elias to an armchair where he sat, his gaze lost. Luro, in his cage, let out a final, "I'm hungry," but this time it seemed like a cry of victory, not despair. Justice finally had arrived. Sophia staggered, her face contorted in a mask of disbelief and fury. The humiliation was a physical blow, more painful than any slap. She tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat, a knot of despair and rage. "No, Arthur, you can't do this," she managed to stammer, her voice hoarse. "I'm your wife. I have rights. You can't just kick me out." Arthur stared at her, his expression unshakable. "You lost all your rights the moment you decided to torture an elderly and defenseless man under my roof, Sophia. You lost the right to call yourself my wife, to bear my surname, to set foot in this house." At that instant, the main door opened, and two burly security guards in their impeccable uniforms entered the room. Their faces were impassive, but their eyes scanned the room, sensing the tension. They positioned themselves discreetly, awaiting Arthur's orders. Sophia felt an icy shiver. Reality hit her with brutal force. "No, I'm not going anywhere!" she screamed, her voice rising in pitch, hysterical. "This is absurd! I'm calling my lawyers. You'll regret this, Arthur." Arthur took a step forward, his voice low, but charged with unquestionable authority. "You won't call anyone, Sophia. Your lawyers cannot defend cruelty, and I regret nothing except having been blind for so long." He gestured to the guards. Escort Mrs. Sophia to the exit. Make sure she takes only her most essential personal belongings. No jewelry, no company documents, nothing that isn't strictly hers. And ensure she does not return. The guards approached Sophia, one on each side. She recoiled, her eyes wide, panic returning. "No! Get your hands off me! I'm not a criminal! I'm the lady of the house!" "You were," Arthur corrected, his voice emotionless. "Now you are nothing here." Sophia tried to struggle, but the guards were professional and firm. They held her by the arms, without hurting her, but preventing any resistance. Her dignity, already in tatters, completely crumbled. She looked at Maria, at the other staff, seeking some sign of compassion, but found only looks of revulsion and relief. Her gaze fixed on Elias, who was sitting in the armchair, his face pale and eyes teary, but with a gleam of clarity she had never seen before. That look was the final blow. The betrayal she had inflicted on him was now reflected in her own destiny. "You'll regret this, Arthur," she hissed as she was dragged towards the door. "You'll regret believing a parrot and a senile old man." The door closed with a dull thud, sealing Sophia's fate and the end of her reign of terror in the mansion. A heavy silence fell over the room. The tension, which had previously been palpable, now slowly dissipated, leaving behind a strange emptiness. Arthur let out a deep sigh, feeling the weight of years of deception finally lifted from his shoulders. He knelt beside his father's armchair, taking his cold and wrinkled hands. "Father," Arthur began, his voice choked with emotion. "Forgive me. Forgive me for having been so blind, for not having listened to you, for not having protected you." Elias raised a trembling hand and touched Arthur's face. His eyes, previously lost, now showed a tenderness and a deep sadness. He said nothing, but his gaze said it all. The pain of betrayal, the relief of salvation, and the unconditional love for his son. Maria, with tears in her eyes, approached. "Mr. Arthur, Mr. Elias needs a doctor. He is very weak." "Yes, Maria, call the best doctor in the city and prepare his room. I want him to have everything he needs. Food, comfort, affection, everything," Arthur said, his voice firm but full of a new determination. He turned to the other staff. "From today on, my father will be treated with the respect and love he deserves. Anyone who dares to disrespect or neglect him will be immediately fired." Luro, who had remained silent since Sophia's departure, let out a soft chirp. "I'm hungry," he chirped. But this time the voice was not of despair, but of a newfound hope. Arthur looked at the parrot, a sad and grateful smile appearing on his lips. "Yes, Luro," he whispered. "We were all hungry. But now we will truly nourish ourselves." The night was still long, but the darkness of cruelty had been expelled from that house. The reconstruction would begin now, brick by brick, meal by meal, to heal the wounds of a father and son, and to restore the stolen dignity. The heavy silence Sophia left behind was a stark contrast to the storm of hysteria and fury that had just swept through the room. Arthur, still kneeling beside his father's armchair, felt the weight of guilt and relief crushing him. He had been blind, but now he saw, and the clarity was painful. The anger still burned in his chest, but it was a controlled anger, directed at injustice and cruelty, and no longer at confusion. Elias's eyes were fixed on a distant point, teary, but with a clarity Arthur hadn't seen in a long time. "Father," Arthur began, his voice choked with emotion, a lump tightening his throat. "Forgive me for not having listened to you, for not having protected you. I failed you, Father." Elias raised a trembling hand and touched Arthur's face, a gesture of forgiveness and love that transcended any words. His eyes, previously lost in the fog of hunger and confusion, now showed a tenderness and a deep sadness, but also a gleam of recognition and affection. He said nothing, but his gaze said it all: the pain of betrayal, the relief of salvation, and the unconditional love for his son, who had finally seen the truth. A single tear rolled down the old man's wrinkled face, but it was a tear of liberation, not despair. Maria, with tears in her eyes and her face marked by emotion, approached. "Mr. Arthur, Mr. Elias needs a doctor. He is very weak, and something warm to drink, perhaps a light broth." Arthur nodded, renewed determination in his eyes. "Yes, Maria, say it's an emergency, and prepare his room, everything, and let it be the sunniest room in the house, with a view of the garden." He turned to the other staff, who watched the scene in silence, some with teary eyes. "Anyone who dares to disrespect or neglect him will be immediately fired. This house will be a true home, not a stage for cruelty." Luro, who had remained silent since Sophia's departure, as if processing the victory, let out a soft chirp. "I'm hungry," he chirped, but this time the voice was not of despair, but of a newfound hope, almost a plea for a new beginning. The sound of plates being emptied into the trash would no longer be heard. "Yes, Luro," he whispered, stroking his father's head. "Hunger for truth, hunger for justice, hunger for peace. Truly." The wounds were deep, but the healing would begin now, brick by brick, meal by meal, to restore the stolen dignity of a father and the trust of a son. The path would be arduous, but the truth had prevailed, and with it the promise of a future where love and respect would reign. "Maria," he called, his voice hoarse, but charged with a new authority. "Please call Dr. Almeida immediately and prepare my father's room. I want it to be as comfortable as possible." Maria, with teary eyes, nodded and hurried to carry out the orders. Arthur turned his attention back to Elias, whose cold and wrinkled hands he still held. The old man was pale, exhausted, but there was a gleam of recognition in his eyes that Arthur hadn't seen in years. "Father," Arthur whispered again, his voice choked with emotion, "forgive me. I swear I will make up for every day of suffering. You will recover here with me." Elias, with visible effort, tried to lift his head. His dry lips moved, and Arthur leaned in to listen. "Water," Elias managed to murmur, his voice almost inaudible, a faint thread of sound. Arthur sprang to his feet. "Water! Someone, please bring water!" One of the staff, the young steward Pedro, who had been watching the scene with a mixture of shock and compassion, was already returning with a glass of fresh water and a spoon. Arthur took it and, with delicacy, helped his father drink small sips. Each drop seemed like a balm for Elias's dry throat, and Arthur observed the ravenous thirst in the old man's eyes, feeling a tightness in his chest. Within minutes, Dr. Almeida, the family doctor for decades, arrived in a hurry, his expression serious upon seeing Elias's state. He examined the elderly man carefully, measuring his blood pressure, checking his heart rate, while Arthur and Maria watched in anguished silence. "He is severely malnourished and dehydrated, Arthur," Dr. Almeida said, his voice low and concerned after the assessment. "It's a miracle he endured so much. We need to admit him for a faster and monitored recovery. His organs are under stress." Arthur shook his head, his determination unshakable. "No, doctor. I want him to recover here at home, in the most comfortable room with full attention. I can hire 24-hour nurses if necessary, but he needs to be in his own environment, surrounded by people who love him." Dr. Almeida pondered for a moment, understanding Arthur's emotional need. "It's risky, Arthur, but I understand your point. If you ensure a qualified nursing team and follow my instructions strictly, we can try. He will need an intravenous drip in the first few hours for rehydration and a strict liquid and soft diet, and above all, much affection and patience. The recovery will be slow." "It will be done, doctor." Arthur assured, his voice firm. "Everything necessary. I will spare no effort or expense." While Dr. Almeida prepared the intravenous drip, Maria had already mobilized the team. Elias's room was being aired out. Clean and soft sheets were placed on the bed, and a small bedside table was arranged with fresh flowers from the garden. The mansion, previously a stage of dissimulation and silent cruelty, began to breathe an air of care and truth. The other staff who had witnessed the scene now worked with a new purpose, a visible relief on their faces. Loro, from his cage, watched everything with his intelligent and curious eyes. Suddenly, he let out a chirp, but this time it wasn't the weak and desperate lament from before. "I'm hungry," he chirped, and then imitated the sound of a plate being filled with food, not emptied into the trash. It was a sound of abundance, of promise, of a new beginning. Arthur looked at the parrot, a genuine smile, the first in a long time, illuminating his tired face. "Yes, Loro," he said, his voice choked with emotion, "we will all nourish ourselves with everything that was denied to us. Hunger for food, hunger for justice, hunger for peace." He approached his father, who was now receiving the intravenous drip, and stroked his white hair. Elias's journey to recovery would be long and arduous, and Arthur's journey to forgiveness, perhaps even more so. But the first and most important step had been taken. The truth, revealed by a parrot and a son's intuition, had freed the house from its darkness. Love, finally, began to rebuild what cruelty had tried to destroy. The mansion, once a symbol of opulence and dark secrets, was about to transform into a true home, where the voice of respect and affection would forever drown out the echo of plates thrown in the trash. The night advanced, but in the mansion, the darkness was no longer of secrets, but of a watchful vigil. Elias was carefully taken to his new room. The environment, previously cold and impersonal, now radiated warmth. Light curtains allowed the moonlight to enter softly, and a gentle lavender scent hung in the air. The bed, with soft linen sheets, seemed an invitation to the rest the elderly man hadn't had in a long time. Arthur remained by his father's side, holding his hand while the two nurses, hastily hired by Dr. Almeida, installed the equipment and monitored Elias's vital signs. The intravenous drip was already flowing, and the old man's facial pallor seemed to diminish slightly, almost imperceptibly. "He is stable, Mr. Arthur," said the head nurse, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes. "But recovery will be a slow and delicate process. We need to have a lot of patience." Arthur nodded, his eyes fixed on his father. "I know, and I will have all the patience in the world. I won't leave his side." Hours later, with the day already dawning, Maria brought a light and nutritious broth, prepared with care. It was Elias's first true meal in months. Arthur, with the help of the nurse, administered the broth spoon by spoon. Each sip was a small triumph. Elias drank slowly, his eyes half closed, but with an expression of pure relief and gratitude. It was not just nourishment for the body, but a balm for the soul. "Is it good, Father?" Arthur asked, his voice choked. Elias couldn't respond with words, but a slight nod of his head and an almost inaudible murmur of "yes" were enough to fill Arthur's heart with renewed hope. That was the beginning. Loro, who had been transferred to a larger, more comfortable cage in the corner of the room, observed the scene. He didn't repeat, "I'm hungry," for a while, as if understanding the gravity of the moment. Instead, he let out a soft warble, almost a melody, and then imitated the sound of a plate being filled with food, a sound of abundance and care. It was as if the parrot, the guardian of truth, now became the herald of healing. The mansion, once a stage of dissimulation, was now a sanctuary of care. The staff moved with a new lightness. The tension that had hung in the air dissipated. Sophia was a bitter but distant memory, a painful chapter that had been torn out. Arthur knew that Elias's journey would be long and full of challenges, and that his own journey of forgiveness and self-forgiveness would also not be easy. But seeing his father finally receiving the care and love he deserved, Arthur felt a deep peace. The truth had freed everyone, and with it, the promise of a home where respect and affection would be the only law. Weeks turned into months, and the mansion witnessed a remarkable transformation. Elias, under Arthur's dedicated care and an exemplary nursing team, began to flourish. His pallor gave way to a healthier color. His eyes, previously clouded by weakness, now shone with renewed clarity. He began to sit up, to take small steps with support, and most importantly, to converse. His words, initially hesitant, grew firmer each day, filling the silence Sophia had imposed. Arthur spent most of his time by his father's side, reading to him, talking about the past, the future and the present. Every smile from Elias, every word of gratitude was a balm for Arthur's tormented soul. The guilt was still there, a constant reminder of his blindness, but it was slowly being replaced by the joy of seeing his father regain his life. "I'm so sorry, Father," Arthur said one afternoon, as he helped Elias drink some fresh juice, "for not having seen, for not having noticed." Elias held his son's hand, his fingers wrinkled but now stronger. "You are here now, my son. That's what matters. The past. The past is behind us. What matters is today and tomorrow." Elias's words were a gift, a tacit forgiveness that Arthur had longed for so much. The mansion, once a place of secrets and whispers, now echoed with laughter, conversations, and the gentle sound of life. Maria and the other staff, relieved and happy, worked with new enthusiasm, preparing nutritious meals and tending to the garden, which seemed to flourish in sync with Elias's recovery. Luro, the parrot, was the house mascot. He no longer repeated, "I'm hungry." Instead, he chirped happily, imitating the sound of Arthur calling, "Father," or the clinking of cutlery on full plates, or even Elias's gentle laughter. He was the living reminder that the truth, however painful, had brought healing. Sophia, unmasked and humiliated, had lost everything. Her ambition had consumed her, leaving her homeless, without reputation, and without the luxury she so coveted. Her fall was swift and complete, a testament to justice that at times delays but does not fail. Arthur looked at his father, who dozed peacefully in the armchair, the afternoon sun warming his face. The journey had been arduous, filled with pain and regret, but it had culminated in a rebirth. The mansion, once a symbol of opulence and dark secrets, was now a true home, where love, respect, and abundance were the only law. The voice of affection had forever drowned out the echo of plates thrown in the trash, and the family finally was whole again. The hunger for justice had been satisfied, and peace, at last, had found its way back.